We are proud to work with Stacy Westfall of Westfall Horsemanship in sponsoring Ride Safely on the Trail with Weaver Leather. This informative DVD covers a range of important topics to help maintain you and your horse's safety while on the trail. For thousands of years, there has been an unmistakable bond between horses and humans. Communication and understanding have always played important roles in the interactions we have with horses. In certain situations, horses have an instinctual fight or flight response. While this is a natural instinct, it can result in some unsafe situations for both horse and rider. Weaver Leather has teamed up with Westfall Horsemanship to produce this DVD containing the vital information you need to help prepare yourself and your horse for a variety of potential scenarios.
Hi, I'm Stacy Westfall, and I've teamed up with Weaver Leather to bring you this DVD on safety on the trail. I'm sure no matter what level of rider you are, you'll find some interesting and helpful tips. Let's get started. Before we head out on the trail, you want to start out by grooming your horse. Grooming your horse should be something that you do daily so that you're very familiar with what is normal for your own horse. One of the most important parts of grooming your horse is cleaning out their feet. The process of running your hand down the horse's leg and picking up the foot is going to be part of your routine every day, and during that time it gives you a great opportunity to examine their tendons and their feet to see if there's anything abnormal or anything in their hooves that shouldn't be there. You want to always do this before your ride. You should know every little bump or bruise or scar that your horse might have. That way you can identify any changes. Anytime that you're working around your horse, you need to keep in mind that they are large creatures and that you can be injured. You need to prevent injury by making sure that you're aware of where their feet are. One of the easiest ways to do that is to keep at least one hand on the horse at all times. This way, if the horse does start to move towards you, it's going to help you be able to push yourself out of the way. What you don't want to do is stand just outside, away from the horse, say 4 or 5 feet back to where if the horse goes to kick, they're actually going to be able to get a lot of swing. If I were standing right here and Popcorn went to move, he can only get so much swing before he actually comes in contact with me. If I move back here, the same way that if I went to kick at him, I could get a lot more power from here to actually hit him. So being close and keeping your hand on keeps you safe. The other thing this does is that it allows the horse to know where you are at all times, because by staying in contact with the horse, there are no surprises. Especially if you go around the back of the horse, you want to make sure that you're touching the horse. When we look at the tack, we want to make sure that the headstall fits properly. If you're going to go out on the trail, you should never tie your horse directly with the bridle reins. If you're thinking that you're going to tie your horse up, you need to either carry a halter with you or do what I've done here, which is have a rope halter underneath the bridle. The bridle fits snug up just in the corner of his mouth. If you hang it too low, then you're going to bump it into the teeth that are here, and if you pull it up too high, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. If I'm going to err, I'm going to go a little bit on the higher side. Whenever I tie the horse up, I always look for a safe spot that's at least eye level or higher to tie the horse to. I always tie the horse with a quick release knot, which means that if I need to, I can quickly pull on this and it will be completely untied. When you're out on the trail, you need to be sure that if you tie to things, that they're things that are safely and securely going to hold your horse. You don't want to tie to a flimsy or low branch that the horse can easily bend or break. You need to be sure that there are no obstructions that the horse can get their legs tangled into. So keep all of these things in mind when you're out on the trail. When you saddle up your horse, you need to make sure that you lift the saddle pad up into your saddle. I like to see that you can slide your hand up underneath the saddle. My fingertips are actually up in here. If you have a high quality saddle pad like this one from Weaver, you can lift that up in there, and then that way it actually allows your saddle to hold on to their withers a little bit, and it prevents it from rolling as easily. Also, when you do go to tighten up this girth, you want to make sure that you get it snug when you first start off so that it doesn't slip before you mount. But I like to snug it up here, and then I like to lead my horse off and snug it up again, because a lot of horses will kind of hold some air that they'll release. And so I want to make sure that I do have it nice and snug. I want to snug it up at least 2 or 3 different times, as opposed to just going for as tight as I can right away. This girth is actually really nice on this saddle because it's the Weaver leather smart cinch, and it rolls very easily, so it makes it easy to tighten up to the next hole. You always want to make sure, if you're going to use the little prong here on the girth, you want to make sure that after you tighten it, that you pull like this to make sure that this is secure against here, and that is what's going to hold you on nice and safe. When you've got your tack on your horse, you need to be sure that it all fits properly. The breast collar should allow a little bit of room so that when the horse moves its shoulder back and forth, that it's not restricting the horse's motion. And yet you don't want it so loose that it's not functioning for what it was designed for, which is to keep the saddle from sliding back. You also want to make sure that the lower strap fits somewhat snugly so that the horse can't get its foot caught through there. If you happen to ride with a back cinch, you need to make sure that the back cinch fits snug enough that maybe you can just slip your hand through, but you definitely don't want to see a lot of gap, because if you're out riding, and especially if you're in the bugs or low branches, low brush, if your horse goes to swat a fly with its hind leg, it could potentially get its foot caught in that back girth strap. I want to make sure that all of my Chicago screws are here and tight. A good time to check this is not only at the beginning of the ride, but when you get back from the ride. This is a time that when you get back from the ride that you can go over your equipment and remove any excess debris, dirt, sweat buildup, because most of this tack is leather, and it's all very natural, and so we need to make sure that we replenish the oils. We need to go over those things and clean them and replace any oil that needs to be put back into the leather to keep it soft and supple. Even good equipment can wear, and you need to be aware if things like your cinch is beginning to crack, because that can be very unsafe, and that would be a good time to replace your items before an accident happens. I want to make sure before I go out on the trail that my saddle is snugged up. Here at the trailer, I'll have it snug enough that I can lead the horse around and safely, but I want to make sure that before I mount up that it's tight enough so that it's not going to slip when I mount. Whenever you're hooking and unhooking your tack, if you are using a breast collar or a back cinch, you always need to remember that the first thing you hook is your front cinch, and the last thing you unhook when you unsaddle is your front cinch. This cinch is what holds your saddle secure, and if you were to undo this before unhooking your breast collar, you'd be putting your horse and yourself in a situation where the saddle could roll underneath the horse and be held on there just by the breast collar, which would be enough to keep it attached to the horse, but not enough to keep it in a safe place. As we prepare to mount up on the horse, 2 important safety things to remember are your boots and your helmet. Any boot that you wear, you should never wear sneakers. You should always wear some kind of a boot with a heel. Preferably a 1-inch heel like this one would be nice, because it's going to keep your foot from being able to slide all the way through the stirrup. It's important to make sure that your stirrup fits your boot. If you stick your foot in and it feels like your foot is going to be stuck into this, you need a little bit of room. If this was a man with a large foot getting in this stirrup, he could potentially get his foot stuck, even though mine fits nice nicely in there. Same thing with children. If children mount up in an adult saddle, they're at a lot greater risk of their whole entire foot slipping through. As you can see, mine's going to be stopped by the front, but if you put my 7-year-old in this saddle, he would be able to easily slide his foot through. So you need to keep those things in mind. You want to keep safety number one. Also, as we go to mount up, we want to talk a little bit about headgear. If you're over the age of 18, you have the ability to make your own choices. Headgear, a safety helmet is always a wise choice, especially if you're a newer rider or if you don't have a lot of experience with the horse that you're currently riding. Anybody under the age of 18 really should wear a helmet, definitely should wear a helmet, and with children riding, whether that is at home or out on the trail. When we head out on the trail, you always want to remember that because safety is key, we need to make sure that the horses have some kind of a foundation trained on them before we go. One of the things that we do is we make sure that the horses will bend their heads around. We teach the horses that this is how we're going to stop them. If I get out on the trail and my horse becomes unruly, won't listen to me, a lot of times people have the tendency to want to pull back on both reins. Because they pull back on both reins and leave the horse's head straight in front of them, if the horse chooses not to listen to that, the horse can outpower you if its head is straight. You want to make sure that you have the ability to take hold of one rein and pull that horse's head around, and you want to make sure you've done enough arena work and work at home before you head out on the trail that your horse will respond to that cue so you can do a one rein stop for safety. Before you head out on the trail, make sure that you know the condition of your horse. If your horse hasn't been out since last winter, don't sign yourself up for a 2-hour trail ride. When you do head out, if it's a trail that you don't know, I suggest going with somebody who knows the trail. A nice guide will always help you to understand and know where the trail is, how long you're going to be gone for, and what kind of hazards or obstacles you might run into. If your horse hasn't handled water before, you might not want to get 5 miles out into the woods before you find out that you're going to have to cross a major river. With the right preparation, trail riding can be a very enjoyable and fun activity for you and your horse. You want to keep safety in mind when you're out on the trail. Lots of different things can pop up. You need to be prepared ahead of time. One thing that's really important to do when you're out trail riding in groups is to make sure you keep the proper distance between horses. Allow for about 1 horse length between each horse, and this will give you time to prepare your horse to stop or to allow more room if the horse in front of you is having trouble. One of the most common difficulties in trail riding is crossing foreign objects. That can be a stream or mud or logs across the trail. Oftentimes the horses don't look at you as a leader and they don't have enough confidence in the rider, and so they fear for their life, and so they question your authority and whether or not they should listen to you. You'll see horses throw their heads up, resist the bit, refuse to go forward when the rider cues them with their legs. Occasionally you'll get horses that jump across the water and have very big reactions to things like that. So we want to make sure that you're prepared ahead of time before you get on the trail to prevent and to know how to handle difficult situations. When you head out to ride, if you're on private property, be sure that you've asked permission. If you're on public property, be sure to stick to marked trails. People leaving the trails are causing parks to consider shutting down trails. When you're out on the trail with your horse, you need to remember that you're doing training the whole time that you're riding. Whether you're in the barn handling your horse or out on the trail, every interaction that you have with the horse is training. Be polite to your other riders. If you're riding in a large group, make sure ahead of time that you're all comfortable with whatever speed you're going to go. If you decide to increase the speed to a trot or a lope, Be sure everybody in the group knows this ahead of time. No one wants to be the one caught at the end when all the other horses go racing ahead. If you're riding through dense forest like this, if you move a branch out of the way of your face or your horse, be sure that it doesn't snap back into the horse behind you. Warn somebody that you're moving the branch and remind them that they need to keep their distance back. I look at horse training like making deposits in a bank account. And every time that you ride your horse or handle your horse, you're either making a deposit or a withdrawal. So when you're out on the trail, you can take the opportunity to put a little bit of training time in. It's fun to enjoy the scenery, but don't be afraid to make certain areas training grounds. See if you can set up situations where you're going to be asking the horse to do something it might be a little bit uncomfortable with, and have a plan that you've developed ahead of time in the ring for how you're going to handle situations like this. It's okay, and it's actually good to let the horse investigate things, because horses are curious and they're out to protect themselves. They want to make sure that the situation that you're putting them in is going to be safe. The more safe situations you put them in, the more they'll begin to trust you. But don't be afraid to take the time and enjoy your horse. Enjoy learning their learning style. Looking at this horse's body language, there are moments when it looks like it might leap. You can see with its hind legs pulled up way underneath it that it's considering gathering its body and possibly jumping the puddle. The horse is investigating and putting its head down, attempting to sniff. These are all good signs. They're curious signs. Curiosity is a positive tool in horse training. A horse that's completely fearful won't show you signs of curiosity. So what you want to do in situations like this is remain patient. Success. When you come to hills, it's important to remember to stay out of your horse's way. What that means on the way up hills is that you need to lean forward and make sure that your gear is all safely adjusted. You want to make sure that your saddles aren't going to be slipping on the way up hills. So using a nice quality breast collar is a good idea. It's important when you're going up and down hills to make sure that you help your horse and not hinder it. It's very important on the way down a hill to make sure that you keep yourself sitting back over the horse's center of gravity. The horses are going to need to sit back on their haunches, so it's a good idea for the rider to look up and ahead. One temptation is for the riders to look down at the ground. At this point, you need to trust your horse to know where its feet are. Slowing the horse down on the trail shows control and trust. If you don't know the trail, be cautious, because you need to keep your horse's safety and your safety in mind. Old barbed wire fences can be very well disguised in fallen trees. If you go to step over broken tree branches, you might end up wound up in barbed wire. Okay, Michelle, I'm going to show you an exercise that you can use while you're at home or out on the trail to get your horse a little bit softer, and something that you can do with the horse if the horse is tossing its head around. So if you can go ahead and dismount for me, I will demonstrate and then I'll have you give it a try. So while we're right here in this little clearing, if you want to just step back near that tree, I will show you what I want to have Dolly do. Is I want to have her bend her head around. This is going to be the beginning of a one-rein emergency stop. And I want to just make sure that when I pick up on this rein, do you see how there's resistance there? How her first reaction is to move her feet around. That's good in a way because that's where your steering comes from, but we want her to actually know that she can, if I'm not asking her to move, if my voice isn't asking her to move, or if I were mounted, if I were banging her with my legs, I would expect her to move, but right now, if I pick up on the rein, I just want her to bend her head. And so she's showing just a little bit of resistance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up just a little bit, and I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to wait until she brings her nose towards me, just right there. Did you see that, Michelle? Where she just kind of ducked her nose towards me. And I'm going to sit here and refresh this. This is something that if you take a break on the trail, before you get in trouble, it's good to know that you have this in place because you might not always find a little clearing to be able to practice it with. Here we go. I'm going to move her back down here so we don't back up into the brush. We're going to want to do this on both sides. But it's something that we teach the horses very early in their training before we even ride them as 2-year-olds. Good job, Dolly. But a lot of times it gets a little rusty if it's not used. Good job. I'm going to do it again from this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm putting my hand back here on the saddle. That way if she does move her feet around, I'm not as likely to get stepped on because I'm going to follow the saddle. And I'm just going to take the slack out of the rein. And if she moves, even though that time it looked like she was giving because she was going to swat a fly, that's okay. I'm still going to reward her. Sometimes those accidental little spots like that are where the horses actually discover the reward. I'm just holding. You can see my hand's real steady because I've actually put it on the breast collar. And there when the rein was slack, I release. That's her reward. I'm going to pick up again. And I'm just going to bring my hand right around to here. I'm holding onto this, and when you see this rein get loose, and it's something that I can feel in my hand also, when you see that rein get loose, that's when you're going to release. And we want to get to where we can actually bring her head all the way around. Now, if this was a very young horse that hadn't ever gone through this training, I would suggest using a snaffle bit because it has a more direct pull. The one issue that you can run into with the curb bits is that when you pull on the side, it rotates this piece just a little bit up into their mouth. So the horse needs to have an idea of this general concept before you move into a shank bit. It'll make it a lot easier on you and the horse. There we go. That was nice. We'll repeat this on the other side. Ideally, what we want is we want to get her to where she'll stand here and stand still and flex both directions. Good. If I pick up quickly like I did right there, you'll notice that she started to move around. When you pick up quickly on the horses, sometimes it raises their flight instinct up a little bit. They're a little more startled. And so I actually want to get my horses to the point where I can take the slack out of the reins quickly, because I'm sure you've noticed when you've been trail riding, there are different times when, let's say, a deer jumps out, you're not going to move your hands super slow. You're going to have more of a quick reaction. We want to make sure the horse is prepared for that ahead of time, because as long as my hand moves smoothly, there's nothing wrong with it moving quickly. We'll see in just a minute. You'll also see that she's spreading her legs further apart, getting her balance. Resistance right there. That's the same resistance that's going to give you head tossing, or when you pick up to steer and just the general pulling the reins, because right now she's pulling quite a bit of pressure on me there, right there, when she gave. And the other thing you have to remember is that their neck muscles, if they haven't been doing this recently, then they've got to stretch just like you doing a aerobic stretch. So make sure that you do this consistently, and that way she can build up to it and then she can maintain it. Okay, so place your left hand on the back of the saddle somewhere. And if this is the first time, or if you're unsure, it's okay to just pick up and ask for just a little bit of give like that. Okay. But then what we're going to build up to is being able to bring the head all the way around to the saddle. Go ahead. Good. Find a place to stop your hand and hold until she makes the last move, giving a little bit. There, she's actually pulling it. Then she gave it just for a second. That's good. Then go ahead and repeat it. It's very important that your right hand that's got the rein, that was excellent, finds a place to rest. Because one common mistake with this exercise is that people will pull the head around to here, and then as the horse comes, their hand keeps moving. So come around with a purpose and aim for a certain part of the saddle. A lot of times I'll go to the breast collar or to anywhere as long as it's a plan. Bring your hand around. Go ahead. Good, that was excellent. You see how she gives that last bit? And her feet are staying still. If her feet kept moving, what I'd want you to do is hold that pressure and just follow along with her until her feet stopped for a moment, and then you'd release. And then that's how she's going to figure out. For some reason, the pressure doesn't disappear until my feet stay still and I give my face. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is practice with her on both sides until you can take the slack out, bring it all the way around, and that you can move quickly from side to side doing that, and her feet stay still. Okay. When you get that from the ground, then I want you to move up into the saddle and repeat the same process. Okay. Same rules apply. Very good. Okay. Well, Michelle, you've had a little bit of time to practice. Let me see what you've got done from on her back. That's okay. A lot of times when you move to a different location, the horse will start moving their feet again. Remember the same rules. Hold right there, plant your hand. As soon as she releases, give back to her. Do the slow motion, hold, release, good. Very good. Very good. And what you can do to increase the difficulty of this for the horse is the easiest version of it is when you slowly draw their head around, hold it, and then release. As you start to make it more difficult, what you're going to do is you're going to start to pick up quicker and still release with the right timing when the horse is soft and giving to you. Then when you start switching left and right, that's going to make it even more difficult for the horse. So if you notice that she's uptight, maybe go back a step or two, slow it down a little bit, and then eventually work towards speeding it up. Looks good. Another thing to remember and to notice is that if your horse does this better to one side than the other, it's good for you to remember that, because horses a lot of times may have pulled something out in the pasture. If you do an exercise like this daily, every time you ride at least, you'll understand if there's something different or if your horse naturally has more stiffness on one side, and that's something you can work on. It's important to remember when you're out on the trail that you are constantly training your horse. If you have the situation where you have the choice to go around a log or to cross over the logs, you need to keep safety in mind. If you suspect that your horse is going to have a big reaction to it, then you need to take the safe route and go around the log. But at some point you need to take the time to go over smaller obstacles or do more groundwork at home to prepare your horse in case you do come to an obstacle that you can't go around. As far as taking things along with you, it's nice to have a nice set of saddlebags. It's important to remember to carry equipment for you and your horse. Some of the things that I personally take on the trail with me: halter and lead rope, hoof pick, bug and fly spray for myself and for my horse, extra Chicago screws, a watch so that I do not end up out for 4 or 5 hours if I only meant to be out for one, a cell phone, reflectors for you and your horse if there's any chance that you'll be stuck out after dark, a flashlight for the same reason, and leather laces, vet wrap and gauze, and other things that you or your horse may need if you get in trouble for first aid out on the trail. One of the biggest challenges out on the trail is keeping your horse's attention focused on you. The trail is probably the most challenging place for that. In a show arena, the horses don't have nearly as many things to look at. Right here, as we're getting ready to cross the mud, we have the obstacle of the leaves on the trees that the horses want to eat. We have the idea that we're headed back home. Go ahead and walk up gently, Chris. And we have the horse's desire to get back to the stable. And so we see a lot more of a challenge. The trail ride is not only for your enjoyment, but for your horses. So remember to keep their comfort in mind. Plan accordingly so that your trail does end up somewhere near water along the way if you're going to be out for a long time. Your horse needs a drink just as well as you do. Being with your horse is all about communication. It's about developing a bond and a relationship that allows you to share the horse's power and beauty and athletic ability so you can go out on these trails and you actually feel like you're a part of the horse. If you've got a new horse that you've just recently purchased or a young horse, make sure you make a short outing the first time around. That way you can ensure a more positive experience. I know when I was growing up in Maine, I used to think that groundwork was brushing and saddling the horse. I've since learned that it's a lot safer if you actually do some groundwork at home in the ring. Also, when you get out on the trail, it's not a bad idea if you come to a clearing like this to take a break and challenge yourself and your horse to do some of the arena exercises. You won't always have the opportunity when you're out on the narrow trail. So when you do break into a clearing like this, ride with your friends, organize either a game or an activity that you've practiced at home, and have fun. Well, this is Sage, and she's a 5-year-old that we've seen some clips of on the trail. This is the first time that I've worked with her. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up to her and introduce myself and start working around her, because what I'd like to do is see if I can have some exercises that you can do with your horse at home and some exercises that will help Sage here have a little more emotional control when she goes out on the trail next time. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long lunge whip and just rub it on her body and see what she has for a reaction. I want to see if she's okay with the tools that I'm going to use. I have a rope halter and a 15-foot lead on her. I like using a rope halter as a training tool because it is a little bit more severe feeling than a flat web halter, but it's nowhere near as severe as a chain. And so if she tries to pull away from me, I'll have a better chance of keeping hold of her and not having her drag me around the arena with a rope halter. This is all going well. A lot of horses get real ouchy up in these areas. And if they're going to try to kick at me, I'd rather have them kicking at this lunge whip. Lunge whips work really well for going in between their legs because they are flexible. Good. Now I'm going to check out and see what she knows about staying out of my space and taking commands from me from the ground. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to step towards her and I'm going to see if she'll move her front end away from me. So I'm going to begin to tap her on her neck. And if she turns her head just a little bit like she did there, I'm going to stop tapping. And that's going to be her reward for moving her head slightly away from me. Then I'm going to rub her with my tool. Make sure that she's not getting excited. In a little while, I'm going to do some things that are going to cause her to possibly get excited so I can teach her to emotionally go up and down. That way, I want to teach her how to recover quickly in a high-stress situation. So if a deer pops out on the trail and she gets a really high spike of emotion, I want her to be able to recover quickly. But right now, we've got to build a foundation. I'm going to tap again, tap with a rhythm, tap, and then as soon as she moves her head away like that, I'm going to quit tapping, and that's going to be her reward. Eventually, by making these small little pieces like this, I'm going to get her to bend her neck further and further, and then she's going to take a step with her front feet, and this is how we begin teaching her to move her front end away and to keep her space. If you've ever had a horse that's stepped on your feet or tends to push you with their shoulders, this is a great exercise. Very good. There she stepped with her feet. It's the beginning of a turn away from me. Good job. I hold this hand up here prepared to block my body, and also later on this hand's going to be the cue to move her away. Good. I like that she's remaining relaxed. The rhythm is important here because this is how the horse is going to know the difference between whether or not I'm cueing her or rewarding her. If you tap and you tap once, if you're very inconsistent and you don't have a lot of rhythm, a lot of times the horses will get dull or wishy-washy. They're not sure. Once I start tapping, I carry a consistent rhythm until I get a response, and then I take it away. Very good. Now I'm going to do just a little bit with her hind end and see if I can get her to turn her hind end away from me. This is really important if you have horses that try to kick at you or other horses. And when we go out on the trail, we're going to want to make sure we have control of moving that horse's hind end, especially if it has a tendency to kick at other horses. What I'm going to do, I'm going to prepare this hand to pull back towards her hip. I'm going to reach up here with this whip, and I'm going to begin tapping. I'm going to bend my body slightly because eventually I want to be able to tip my body and have that be the cue. So I'm going to tip my body slightly. I'm going to begin tapping. And I'm going to pull with my left hand and help her find that right answer. Good job. Because we know that if we stand here and pull on the horse's head, that we can probably swing their butt away because a horse acts like a giant teeter-totter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that just a little bit and tap her on the butt. What I'd like to eventually be able to do is I'd eventually like to be able to dip over like this and have her move away from me without me needing to pull on the rope. There you go. That was good. Because I tipped over, I tapped, but I didn't pull on the rope. So she's showing me that she's understanding. This is really good exercise for a horse that has a tendency to want to go running forward instead of moving. A lot of times as riders, we're guilty of only using our legs or a whip to ask the horse to gain speed. And then pretty soon the horses act like they're fearful of the whip, and the only thing they do is consider running. So this is a great exercise to get your horse thinking. The safest horse to trail ride is the one that's thinking about its safety and its rider's safety, not one that's just highly reactive. Very good, Sage. Okay, we're going to switch to another exercise. What I've done now is I've switched to a stick and string. The reason I'm doing this is because I need something with a little bit more weight than the lunge whip has in the rope. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing some things that normally scare horses. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just test it out and see what kind of a reaction she's going to have if I start cold turkey. So what we see is that was just a test to see where we stood with her. And what we found out is that when that noise of the whip going around her begins, she gets very uptight. And those were a lot of the same reactions that we saw when we were out on the trail. We know that she was fine when the lunge whip was just rubbing her, and she was even fine when I started just rubbing her with this. But when I start whipping around her, that's when she has to try to control her emotions in a normally very scary situation for a horse. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start moving around in this area. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk away from her using this stick and string. I'm going to walk away and I'm going to whip, but I'm just going to do it occasionally. I'm going to bump her attention back to me. And I'm going to try to show her that this scary object is moving away from her, not coming after her, not going towards her. I'm going to make sure I'm going to look over my shoulder. I'm going to feel the weight of this line and I can tell where she is. And I'm just going to walk around and I'm going to gently whip the ground, bump her attention back to me. You'll notice that if I whip once, she's kind of okay with it. But as soon as I go to 2 or 3, she starts getting a lot more nervous. What I want to do is through repetition show her that this isn't something she needs to fear. What she's going to learn eventually is that this tool can be used as a motivator, like your spur would be, or like a riding crop would be. It can be used as a motivator to get her to move, but she's going to have to read more into the situation than just the whip's presence. She's going to have to understand that when she reads my body language, that right now I'm relaxed and I'm quiet, and so she should be relaxed and quiet. If I wanted her to move, we'll see that in a little while. If I wanted her to move, I would be aiming my body at her, and I would be using my energy to help focus on pushing her away. I would be using my hand signals. There would be a lot of things that would be there telling her that I was wanting her to move. Right now, what she doesn't read well is that this can be a noisy, moving, scary object, and she should still be relaxed. This should help her a lot on the trail. We're already starting to see she's a little distracted. You can see that she's not focusing on me the whole time, but she's also not running away anymore. There we're seeing a little bit of licking and chewing with her mouth. And that's a good sign, because a lot of times when horses are in scary situations, they're not that different than people. And if you're in a very scary situation or you're nervous, you'll tend to clamp up your mouth, set your mouth, purse your lips, and the horses are a lot like that too. So when they start licking and chewing, a lot of times that's a sign that they're starting to relax. You'll also see that she's following me a lot more willingly. I'm whipping with rhythm. You'll see that the slack is coming out of the rope at times because she walks closer to me, right there. Now I'm only whipping the ground at about maybe 30% of my ability to whip the ground, and I'm still moving away from her. One of the things I'm going to do next is I'm going to start to increase occasionally how hard I whip the ground. So right there, I'll whip it hard once, and then I'll return to a rhythm that she was comfortable with. And I'll slowly work up to where I can whip the ground with 100% of my energy before I start turning around and facing her. You see her look around a little bit more, trying to figure out if there's a different way out of here. I'm going to stop and rub her. You'll notice she's really cautious. She's leaned back. Her muscles were all tense when I first turned around. That's because she's questioning what could be coming next. These are a lot of the reactions that we saw her having on the trail. We can train these horses how to accept emotionally stimulating things, and we can train them what type of reaction we actually want them to have if we take the time. Good job. If this is something that you're just learning to do, just bite off little pieces at a time and try not to get frustrated. Stay safe, and if you need to go get professional help, then find somebody who can help you. I'm going to begin the same exercise again, walking away from her and whipping. She's following me well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn around. I'm going to walk backwards so that I'm facing her. This is going to be a little bit more intimidating to her, a little bit easier for me because I'll be able to see her. But you'll see that it causes her to have a lot more reaction again. Bump her nose towards me. Keep whipping with a gentle rhythm. I'm going to try stopping there for a second. Good. As we head back towards the barn, she pulls a lot more towards the barn. When I head this way, she's more interested in trying to avoid me. When we turn around and head the other way, we're headed back towards her barn, and she gets a lot more interested in running past me. When you get out on the trail, you'll run into situations like that also, because when the horses head back towards the barn, they often anticipate getting back, getting turned out with their friends, going back to the stall to rest. One of the ways that you can help solve that problem is to make sure that you allow a little bit of time at the end of your trail ride to work your horse in the arena. Do some cool down exercises that will be mentally stimulating for your horse, but will also encourage the horse to not get so excited about getting straight back to the barn. This would be one of those exercises you could do. Good, she's starting to get a lot more calm. You see, I really haven't changed what I was doing Right now, the biggest change I just made was standing still, which is actually the next step. It's a little bit harder for the horses to stand still and face the pressure. Right there when she stops, I'm going to stop whipping, and I'm going to rub her. My goal is to be able to, on any given day, bring this horse out of the pasture or out of the stall and be able to whip around the horse cold out of the stall and have the horse have no reaction, because that's going to mean that the horse has learned this exercise well. I'm going to start lightly. This is about 30%. I'm going to stop while she's standing still. Good job. I'm going to rub her with this scary stick. Pretty soon, if you do enough rubbing, it becomes a friendly rubbing thing. Good. I'm going to rub her on this side. I don't know if you can see from there, but she's actually quivering in here. Her muscles are really tight. She's standing still, but mentally, because I can see these physical signs, I know that mentally she's pretty stressed. And we saw some of that on the trail the other day, that the longer she was out and went through a lot of different obstacles, she was very fearful and tight, and she was very sweaty, even though she hadn't physically done a lot of work, because she was so emotionally tense. This kind of stuff can really help her to learn how to control her emotions. Watch her ears, her eyes, her chest, her muscles. When I start doing this, her mouth, you can see her get real tight. These are all signs, whether you're riding or on the ground, that you need to watch for. If your horse is starting to look like this, then they're getting really concerned about something. There she moved just a little, but she made the effort to stay still. I'm going to quit. Rub her. Jump. That was good. She didn't move. That's about 50% of my whipping ability. That's pretty good. So that's a lot closer to 100%, and you can see her throwing her head up in the air just a little bit, getting a little bit nervous. So these are the things that through repetition will go away, and she'll get to where she'll stand with her head lowered, relaxed, and quiet, and that's going to be what we're after. A lot of horses that are funny around their heads, going over the top of their heads like this, is something that you can do repetitively enough that they'll get comfortable with it. It's a must before you ever carry a flag or anything. It can also help a lot with those tree branches and other things you might run into up above their heads. Good. Now I'm going to test my ability to send her around me and have her reverse directions. After we do that, I'm going to move on to a few obstacles that might simulate fearful things she could see on the trail. I'm going to ask, this hand is going to keep her from facing me. I'm going to ask her to go forward. Any of this stuff that seems like it's being covered kind of quick, there are longer DVDs that you can get that go into more detail of how to, if you're running into trouble with your horse, how you can work on getting your horse better at moving its front end or hindquarters or accepting the pressure. Very good. I'm going to try to disengage that hind end. Good. I'm going to whip, see if that's still there. Good. Very good. Going to move her front end this way. Good. Move it a little further. I want to get the front end to move. Send her around me. She's gotten a lot quieter. A little resistance to listening to me from this side of her body. A lot of times people don't handle their horses as much from this side because we naturally lead them from the other side. So a lot of times the horses don't respond as well to our cues from this side. Stop her. Good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a tarp to simulate some of the obstacles we might run into on the trail. Now, you might not run into a folded up tarp, but this could also act like a stream or water or mud, something that the horse might be resistant to walking across. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her to walk across it, not by me leading her across, but by me sending her up to it. So I'm going to point and send her up to look at it and let her explore it. A lot of times the horses that will jump across the stream will also jump over a tarp like this. So when I go out on a ride, good job. When I go out on a ride, I'll often leave my rope halter on under my bridle and keep a rope in my saddlebags. Good. We knew that she's a lot worse from this side taking directions. So what we're seeing here is that she's giving me more resistance on this side. Good. That's something that I'd like to work on. Very happy that she turns around and comes back to look at it. Good. Very good. Now you'll notice that as soon as I went to start whipping around her again, which is something we worked on earlier, because I've put something else out here and because she's distracted and thinking about that tarp, she's now reacting to something she had gotten pretty quiet with. So what I'm going to do is every once in a while you'll see me throwing in this whipping and some of this jumping around her and things like that, because when you start to change things in the scenery, the horses start to think a little bit different. That's what's going to happen to you out on the trail. Some of the things will be going well here, and you've got to work on them out there because the horses start seeing the birds and the trees and the stream and the other horses, and they start reacting a little differently. So you got to keep going back to those foundation pieces. The one thing that keeps scaring her is when I drag this string across the tarp. Makes a funny sound. Makes her uptight. Now I'm going to let my stick and string hit the tarp a couple times. And you'll see that that made her a lot more upset there. Stay back out of my space. Back up. Good. Gonna send her around one more time and see what kind of a reaction we get. Stop her and whip around her. What we're after here is teaching our horse to have really great recovery time, because we can't introduce our horse to every obstacle that we could run into, but if we teach them how to make great transitions, so if they get worked up, they come back down quickly, that's how we're going to stay safe. People often ask me if it's possible to teach a horse to have better reactions when things that you can't control, such as deer jumping out, happen. I think it's completely possible because as you can see here, you can recreate that quite successfully with scary objects if you get creative enough. Let me show you the proper way to introduce this ball. What you want to do when you start introducing the scary objects like the ball is the same thing that we did when we were introducing the whip and we were whipping the ground moving away from the horse. So what we want to do is we want to actually be creative enough to find these scary obstacles, such as this exercise ball that you can buy just about anywhere nowadays. And we're going to start by moving away from the horse. The situation that just happened with the ball rolling at us is much more aggressive, much more like a deer popping out or a pheasant flying up and scaring your horse. But it is something we can work with. What we're going to do is we're going to start rolling this ball away from the horse and around the horse and get the horse to follow us. This exercise is made a lot easier if you've done a lot of homework with the whip. A lot of homework with the whip and the stick and string. Because what happens is this is a lot more awkward than the stick and string. So what I'm going to show you right now is how, now that she's all worked up, how she's going to be more reactive to this stick and string. I'm going to rub it. Do you see her lean back and think about leaving? You see her really tense. And we see a lot of these same reactions with her out on the trail. So if we can teach her how to come through this here in a controlled environment, it's going to make her a lot safer horse for everybody who's around her. What I'm going to do now that she's really worked up is I'm going to go back to an exercise that she's familiar with, which was the whipping around her. I'd like to see her relax a little bit more to where she's not quivering and shaking. She's very expressive. If you watch her head, you can see her quivering. You can see her quivering in her chest there. I'm going to start walking, whipping the ground a little bit. She's completely focused on that ball that's still sitting over there. I need to show her that she needs to bring her attention back to me. There, she's licking and chewing some. She's starting to stand still. Again, if we get these reactions predictable and solid with the whip and the stick and string and the tarp, then we're going to have a lot more solid foundation when these things do pop up. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this ball right out here to the middle. I'm going to go real nice and gentle with it at first. I'm going to give it a little place to park right here. And then the same way that I did when I worked her with the tarp, I'm going to work around the ball. So I'm going to send her around. I'm going to help it to become part of normal routine for her. This is going to give me a chance to make things a little more solid in her training because she's going to question whether or not she should go forward. She doesn't want to go forward there. She doesn't want to get away here. Move your head. Good. She doesn't want to move her head that way. So these are the reactions that you're going to get when the horses are under a little more stress and they're not really wanting to look to you for guidance. One reason that horses, when you take a young horse out on the trail, one reason that horses will follow another horse across a stream is because they trust that other horse as a leader. What we're after in our training is a horse that trusts us as a leader at all times. This horse right now is in self-preservation mode, where she's pretty sure that she needs to be the one in charge of saving her own life. She doesn't really trust me. And right there, she's not respecting my space. She's saying, I'd rather run you over than go near the ball. So that's where I have to know. That's where I have to know that she understands how to move her front end away from me. Good. licking, chewing, showing some curiosity. I'm going to jump. I do those little jumps to simulate something popping up during the trail. And you can see a little shudder go through her body right then. Good. You can see that when I'm encouraging her to walk around this ball, she's looking towards the barn. She's looking to escape. I want to have her turn this direction. You see her pull back. She may have never pulled back tied up, but this is the perfect situation. This is the perfect horse to have turn into a horse that pulls back when it's frightened, because you can see that when she's having a reaction to the ball and I pull on the rope, she throws her head up and starts running backwards. So she's the kind of horse that somebody would likely come to one of my clinics and say, my horse had never pulled back, but the other day broke the halter and ripped things apart. These are some of the signs that you can see before it actually tears something apart. When she's blowing like this, you'll notice if I go like this and jump, that the only thing that changed was me jumping, but because she's got so much of her focus on that ball, she had a big reaction. So that's what happens to you if you're out on the trail and your horse is really focused on a scary log or a stump, and all it takes at that point is somebody's horse stepping on a twig and you've got an accident waiting to happen. If you do all this homework, you'll get a horse that's really quiet. Just the little bit of noise that I'm making right here, even though the ball's not rolling around, that little bit of noise is making her very concerned. I'm going to do it with a rhythm, and when she stands here and accepts it, I'm going to quit. Might jump, see if I get any reaction. Right there we see her being reactive to the stick again. Good. I didn't pull on the rope. She willingly stepped up towards the ball as I stepped up towards the ball. I'm going to let her have her head and sniff around. I want her to explore this. I've got to figure out a way to make this where she wants to be and something that she's going to choose. So I'm going to work her around this ball, and then when she wants to rest, she's going to have to focus on the ball like she is right now. Good. Okay, you got your rest break watching the ball. Let's go back to work. Doing lots of turns takes up a lot of energy with your horse and gets your ability to control their hindquarters and their front end a lot better. Groundwork is not about trying to exhaust your horse. It's about trying to learn how to communicate more clearly with your horse. She looked at the ball once there. I'm going to stop next to the ball. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let her focus this direction and relax while she watches the ball. Good job. She's getting a lot more relaxed moving around the ball. I'm going to step back away from the ball so I can send her between myself and the ball. You want to allow plenty of space so that they don't crowd on top of you. And then I'm going to send her back between the scary object. It's going to take me getting her steering a little bit better from this side. Good. Now, if she wants to slow down and look at the ball, that's okay. But I'm going to keep sending her back up to this. Very good. Groundwork is one of the best places that you can learn how to read your horse's body language because you can see them, you can see the whole horse, you can learn to read their ears and their eyes, their nose, their tail. Then when you get on their back, you'll be able to tell a lot more about them because you'll have learned so much by studying them from the ground. Boo. I like to throw those little jumps in there because it makes her have to change her thought process. When she's staring at the ball, I want to make sure I reward her there enough that she thinks for some reason she leaves me alone if I'm looking at the scary thing. But by doing a little jump like that, it quickly makes her have to switch her train of thought to me and then back to the ball. And this is where I'm starting to teach her how to react and recover. That's all I want. A step or two forward. Just like that. This is the same process you would use for loading a horse into a trailer or teaching a horse to cross a bridge. You reward them when they take a step towards the obstacle and then give them a break. Now I'm going to do something that she doesn't expect, and I'm going to take her away from it. She's standing quietly. I'm going to ask her to leave it. I'm going to bring her back here. And I'm going to put her to work for a minute. She's licking, she's chewing, she's wondering if there's a way out of this work. And I'm going to show her the way out in just a minute when I let her stand and look at the ball again. You'll notice that her lunging is improving greatly. Now I'm going to step up towards the ball. I'm going to let her slow down. I'm going to bring her back up here, and I'm going to let her rest. A little more focus on the ball, please. Good. I leave her alone when she looks at it, and I work her when she's not. Very good. I'm going to take her away again. The hardest part for people when they get close to something scary is making the decision to leave. I'm going to raise the stick up and watch her head. She thinks about taking a step forward. I'm going to use it to block her. Very good. Her whiskers touched it. There, she finally touched it. Good job. I'm going to start moving the ball around some. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk and roll it in front of me. I'm going to go around her. She thinks I'm coming after her, but I'm going to bump her and get her to go behind me. Come back here. There's that pullback that we were talking about earlier. As soon as this starts moving, she starts getting very reactive. And what I want to do is I want to roll it away from her, and I want her to start looking to me for leadership. Right now, she's kicked back into, I need to save myself. Bumper. I don't want her trotting around me. I'm going to reverse directions so it gets on both sides of her. Good. That's the best reaction we've had so far. She started to drop her head down. Now she's trying to lunge again. Now she's starting to pay attention to the idea that it's not coming after her. Good. I'm going to let her rest looking at it. And I'm going to move it again. Switching directions. Makes her uptight. Good. She got relaxed, so I'm going to stop there for a minute. Let her rest. No jumping. When I start again, I'm going to bounce it just a little bit. I'm going to bump her nose. I'm distinctly walking away from her. She's still going around me like a lunge circle, but she's doing it slow. She's staying behind me, keeping herself away from the ball. But she's keeping the rope relatively loose. She's not trying to pull away from me. She's starting to understand a little bit more. I'm going to bump her, see if I can get her to slow down. I'm going to switch my rope. I'm going to switch directions. That usually sets her off. It's not the easiest ball to bounce in the sand. That was really close to heading at her, and she still stood there. Gonna bump her nose back towards it. Good. Good. You'll notice I'm bumping her to stop her from moving, but she's actually worked herself closer and closer to me. You'll see she's pretty worked up. If we work through this kind of stuff, we'll have a lot safer trail horse. Horses are very curious by nature, and if you can figure out how to get that curiosity to work for you, then you end up with a very well-trained horse. This horse, the more I roll this ball away from this horse, the more the horse starts to wonder if it's in control of the ball and why the ball keeps leaving. Water is something that upsets a lot of horses to cross on the trail. One of the best ways that you can work with this is to actually go ahead and make your own mud puddle. Then we're going to use the same techniques that we used when we were introducing the ball. If she shows a lot of resistance, first we're going to send her up towards it and let her look at it. And we could potentially move back away from it and work her, and then send her up and let her explore it again. If you conquer these little water holes at home, you'll have a lot more success out on the trail. Good. Very good. A lot of times you'll be surprised at how much expression they will show to water if it shows up somewhere that they're not used to it, like in the middle of their riding arena. Finding places in the driveway, mud puddles in the driveway after it's rained, is another great place to train them. Good. What she shows me crossing this here is what I'm going to expect to see from her on the trail. It looks like she tries to step across and over it. So if we were going to make this mud puddle again, we might make it wider. There, she's a little too close to me. Going to make sure she stays further away next time. Good. Stay back. Make the turn. Very good. Good. Let's move some of this into riding. This is Popcorn. He was my partner at the 2006 Road to the Horse. And we're going to take him on his first trail ride today. But he's done all these arena exercises. And he was introduced to the ball before his very first ride at Road to the Horse. And now what Popcorn and I do is a game of soccer. So some of these exercises can be really fun. After I did the groundwork with Popcorn with the ball, bouncing it around him, eventually getting it so I could bounce it on his body, I sent him up to the ball just like I did Sage, and I kept working at it day after day until he was okay with walking up to it, bumping it with his nose, bumping it with his feet. And now, because he's okay with the ball everywhere, we can steer it and make a game of soccer out of it. Okay, Chris, I know that you watched me working with Sage earlier, so what I'd like you to do is just go ahead and walk her through this little mud puddle, and we're going to do a few of the exercises from her back that we did from the ground. Good. As a rider, it's important to, let the horse smell and stick its head down there, but also to plan ahead and feel which direction the horse might be moving if it's trying to sidestep to the right or the left. Very good. Very good. Feel free to go ahead and use 2 hands so you can steady her just a little bit more right now while she's being a little more testy. Very good. Look ahead. Look up ahead where you want to go. Very good. A lot of times changing the rider's focus improves the horse quite a bit. Look ahead. Very good. The one thing that we notice again is that she's crossing the water better, headed back towards the barn. Good. Very good. Now, Chris, I'd like to see just a few of the softening and bending exercises. Can I see just a few of those from Sage? Good. What Chris is doing here is the beginning of a one-rein stop. The horse knows this exercise, but is a little bit worked up this morning, and so she's not having the first reaction of softening and giving her face the way that we'd like to. What Chris is going to do and what he needs to do in future days is he needs to pick up on this rein and get the horse to where the horse's first response is to soften and bend to the side without moving its feet. Very good. Much better. This is an exercise that we start with little tiny pieces, just like we did when we were moving the horse's head from the ground. We start by picking up and we release as soon as the horse moves its head just a little bit. And we work up to where Chris is at now, where he can draw that horse's head around to the side. And this is an exercise that we need this horse to get very good at, to where when she first comes out of the stall, her very first reaction is to bend around to his leg without resistance. When we get out on the trail, if he has trouble with her pawing, dancing, tossing her head, threatening to rear, doing different things that she's been known to do before, this is one of the main exercises he's going to have to work with. Because this is Popcorn's first trail ride, you might have heard him snorting just a little bit. He's been showing a lot of expression at different things. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use this rope halter and rope, and I'm going to send him over this. I'm not sure if he's going to walk up to it or if he's going to consider jumping it, but I'm going to let him investigate it himself. There you can hear him snorting. If I want to let him drop his head further, I'm going to have to take the bridle off, because right now I have the reins tied up a little bit high so that he can, so that I didn't have to take the bridle off. But I'm going to go ahead and slip it off so that he has full use of his head, so he can stick it down there and smell and touch and taste some rocks and mud and see what it is, because he's very curious about it. This is where you don't want to feel rushed. You want to feel like you have enough time. So especially with young horses, or if you've just recently purchased a new horse, he's getting more comfortable. You want to know that you are going out on a trail with somebody or a group of people who are okay with you training on the trail. Very good. He took a step forward and he's curious. He's looking at it. He's looking over it. A lot of times this is when people have a more confident horse lead the way, and that's an okay way to do it, but what that's showing you is that's the younger horse trusting the older horse's judgment. So we're just going to work for a few minutes and see if we can get him to follow directions from me. It's always a great idea to send the horse through it if you're not confident that you could ride what they might do if they decide to jump it. Very good. Can you come back? That might not want to be something you want to ride. This gives me the ability to send him back and forth in a way that keeps us both a little safer. That's better. That was much prettier. By the time I get on him, he'll have his balance and footing all figured out. Now that we've worked through it from the ground, let's go ahead and do it from his back. Because I've got the reins in my hand, I can lengthen him and let him sniff. Very good. Remember when you're on the trail to take advantage of little spots where you can move your horse sideways off leg pressure. This is a good time to refresh his memory and gives you a little bit of something to focus on aside from just the other horses. Right now, the rest of my group has gone on, and Popcorn and I are going to take a little bit of time to make sure that I've got his full attention. If you've taken the time to teach your horse how to move away from leg pressure in the arena, it comes in handy on the trail if you need to move your horse sideways to prevent your leg from bumping into a tree. Then the time you've spent in the arena will be helpful. It's also a good idea to occasionally hold your horse back away from the herd. That way your horse doesn't always feel like it has to be right with the group. One of the most frustrating things that people deal with on trail rides are horses with a lot of extra energy. But what you should do is take that energy that they are offering you, figure out a constructive way to use it, and although it might be tiring for you, you will get a lot of training done. Weaver Leather and Westfall Horsemanship would both like to thank you for taking the time to watch this DVD. And please remember to ride safely on the trail.
Welcome to the world of Westfall Horsemanship, the training you've been searching for. Spending time with our horses usually has to fit into busy lifestyles with numerous other demands on our time. Now, that's why it's so important to find effective training methods that complement both horse and rider. Making every session count and being satisfied with the results is key to successful horse training. No one understands that better than Stacy Westfall. Being the mother of 3 young sons, wife to business partner Jesse, and top horse training clinician, while remaining one of the nation's leading competitors in reining, is proof that Stacy has a winning formula. Her methods of horse training are straightforward and practical, delivered in a manner that empowers through clear direction and understanding, without gimmicks, confusion, or unnecessary aggression. Stacy teaches with patience and expertise. Whether you're looking to improve your horse's performance for better enjoyment or for competition, it's important to adopt methods that work for you. Developing a training plan that suits you and your horse can sometimes be the greater challenge. Credibility for Westfall Horsemanship training methods is evident by the long list of accomplishments and championships. No matter what your goals are, winning consistently while balancing a full life that includes the enjoyment of horses requires a plan that works. It's that simple.
Located in picturesque Mount Hope, Ohio, Weaver Leather has a history of producing top-quality products for the equine industry. Our skilled leather craftspeople carefully cut, stitch, and finish each Weaver-manufactured leather product to ensure optimum quality, durability, and beauty. From beautifully crafted headstalls to ruggedly durable reins, our leather craftspeople are committed to your satisfaction. Weaver's nylon craftspeople also produce a wide selection of products, from the finest halters and leads around to exclusives like the Smart Cinch. Our nylon craftspeople are dedicated to bringing you the best nylon products on the market, with precise, even stitching, buckle holes that are heat sealed, and excess threads that are carefully trimmed. Weaver nylon products are a cut above the rest. Whether you're looking for that perfect nylon halter or a collection of leather tack with decorative accents, Weaver has a full selection of products to choose from. Visit us at www.ridethebrand.com for a look at all we have to offer and to find a Weaver Gold, Silver, Bronze, or participating retailer near you.